to say that AI is going to take over everything we do as human beings is to deny the magic of what it means to be a human being. What is the way that you will sell most effectively? It's not just proving that you're not a bot or you're not AI. It's about...
Hi, my name is Will, and welcome to today's episode of the Salesman Podcast. On today's show, we have the legend that is Jeff Bajorek. He is a sales trainer who helps teams build priorities, strategies, and methods to win more business. And on this episode of the show, we look at why you will never sell better than when you sell like you. That specific part of the sentence there, why you should sell like you. And we also go deep into the value of having strong beliefs in sales. Everything that we talk about is available in the show notes of this episode over at salesman.com. And with that said, let's jump right into it. Hey, Jeff, welcome to the Salesman Podcast again.
Oh, well, I got that email from you and I was just like, it's been forever since I've talked to Will, and I can't wait to talk to him again. And I'm glad we were able to reconnect. I was telling my wife earlier this morning before I came down, I said, man, I'm going to sit now and do an interview with one of my favorite people I've ever talked to. And we're going to, I don't even know what we're going to talk about. I'm sure we're going to start somewhere and end up somewhere else. But that's what I've always appreciated about these conversations. And in addition to that, the stuff that nobody else hears, we just talked for a few minutes before, and we may be able to catch or exchange a few words afterward too. So always good to connect with you.
Cool, good man. We might get into some of that. I feel like sports. I feel like strong life skills, being strong in certain areas of life outside of sales can reflect back into sales. So we'll get into that in a little bit. But something I read on your website, which I think is has dramatic value, especially as we enter into the world of AI, where AI is just going to take over everything. We're using a AI generated cadence, which if you're interested, we can touch about in a second, to book meetings for one of my companies that I'm a co-founder in at the moment. And we were looking at hiring a BDR. It's just done. We will probably never hire a BDR now. We will probably look at hiring some kind of engineer, someone who's technical to manage this AI outreach process, because it's absolutely phenomenal. So again, perhaps we'll touch on that in a second. But I was on your website, and something that, again, in the age of AI, I thought was interesting was there was a statement of, you never sell better than when you sell like you. So with that said, what does it mean to sell like you? I've got a thought on this, but let's go to the head honcho.
There were times in my career, particularly where I was early on in my career, where I was just learning, selling with a mentor, and you come out of training, you've got your talking points, you know what you're allowed to say, you got some things that you're told you're not allowed to say, but they're very product-oriented, product-based. And just, again, being young, being new, being eager to learn, I remember walking into meetings with my manager and my mentor and hearing him say things that I thought might get him slapped across the face, literally. Or at the very least, have us escorted out of the building. And instead, the prospect or the customer would lean in and say, tell me more. And so you come out of training, you have this manual, right? And then you go out into the field and you just throw that manual away. The really great salespeople can do that. And, I've been training and coaching now for almost a decade, Will, and people on social media, it doesn't matter which channel they're on, they want this playbook. They want to be told what to do. And I believe that salespeople want nothing more than to just do a good job that they feel that they can be proud of, they feel that they can be paid well for, and they want to stay out of trouble. Right. And it's so hard. Just tell me what to do. I promise I'll do it well. Right. But if there were one or two or even 10 ways to do something, quote unquote, right, that would be the definition of mediocrity. Well, and nobody listens to a show like this. Nobody watches videos like this, online if they're interested in being mediocre. So do you need to say things that'll get you, potentially escorted out of the building? Or I don't think you need to do that. But there certainly is something to having a certain sense of style, a certain sense of panache, a certain swagger, as I like to say. And it really comes from integrity and you expressing your own personality on those sales calls. And, we talk a lot about sales being an art and a science. I think the science is the part that has to happen. That's your process. All these elements need to be included in order to make a sale. But the art is how you make those things happen. And so when I say you never sell better than when you sell like you never sell better than when you bring your full personality. It's not just proving that you're not a bot or you're not AI. It's about showing a little bit of flash of your own personality. It's about saying things that might make somebody uncomfortable, but might make them laugh. It's about bringing compassion and personalization to those sales calls. It's about relating to people, because people still buy from people regardless of all the bots. And so there are a lot of different ways that we can take that, Will, but I just remember being at an outbound conference, standing there talking to a couple of reps, and I really kind of mirroring this story of, look, I can tell you what you need to do, but I can't tell you what to say, because if you try to say it like me, it's not going to go well. The same way as if I tried to say it like you, it wouldn't go well. You have to sell like you. And then I went and I said, wait a second, I might be onto something there. And the web domain was still available. And so I went down that road, and it's been a bit of a platform for me.
So I didn't realize this before you just outlined that. I have had a similar thesis. And so I almost, not the same, but very similar. I'm branding it as you need to become a market of one. And yes. My premise behind all this is that you're just not going to be able to compete with AI outreach. It's going to be too personalized, it's too effective, but it is inherently non-human, because it's obvious it's coming. Even if you click on an avatar and the avatar is photorealistic, then you get into this weird world of, are you duping your prospects by using these AI tools and alluding that it's a real person, even if it comes across as a real person, even if it beats the Turing test, even if it is essentially the conversation you would have with BDR? I still think it may not be forever, but for the next decade, 2 decades, that's going to leave a bad taste in people's mouths. So the only way you can compete with that, because you can't work at that scale, and you can't work with that amount of data set, you can't work with that amount of knowledge, is to become a market of one, is to become someone that people want to engage with. Whether that be because you are interesting, whether that be because you've got polarizing points of view, you've got insights that other people don't have in the marketplace, or it could just be you're just a good dude, or a lady that people want to work with. I think that is going to have more value than it ever has in the past.
I think there is something innate and the analogy that I've used for a couple of years now is, COVID, and when we had to take everything to Zoom or whatever online platform you use. Not a sponsor of the program, so I'm not dropping any names, right? But the idea that there was something missing from those online meetings. You could see facial expressions. You could see some body language. You could certainly say what you needed to say. You could even present what you needed to present, but there was something missing. There was that magic, that energy of being in the room with somebody else. And that is, I think, an appropriate metaphor or comparison to buying from a person versus buying from AI. I don't care about the similarities. I don't care about how much this technology is going to advance in front of our eyes. It's amazing. And I'm fascinated by AI. I'm not denying AI. But to say that AI is going to take over everything we do as human beings is to deny the magic of what it means to be a human being. And I think people have sold that short. So there's still nuance that you can pick up. There are still people, like you said, are they going to be turned off by the fact that, well, they thought they were talking to a person and now they're not? There's some betrayal to that. And that's not a great way to start a selling relationship. So what are those things that we can still do as humans? And we are magic. I mean, I think that's the right way to say it. It sounds a little fluffy, but at the same time, there is something to the energy that you exchange with another person that just cannot be replicated by a bot. And I don't think it ever will. And I think we need to lean into that, because we are not smarter than the bots. We are not more capable. We do not have the work ethic or the capacity that AI does. So we have to think about everything that we've done completely differently. We need to lean into the things that make us us, not just the fact that we're smarter than our competitors or we can reach out through more channels more often. No. All that stuff's going to be outsourced. But what is that thing? And that thing is something that still can't be described. And I also think that as Well, it can be described, but it can't be. It can't be. It's somewhat intangible still, and I think we need to lean into that instead of just trying to be what our traditional definition of more capable is.
Let's make this practical. Let's go back to. We'll use me as an analogy. Or a metaphor or a simile or an anecdote. We'll use me as an anecdote. All right. My English language is terrible. From the country that invented it, and my English language knowledge is terrible. So we'll use an anecdote of me. 19 years ago, first day medical device sales role. Not confident, had just listened to, and it's hilarious as I say this out loud, had just listened in the morning to a confidence hypnosis CD to get myself ready for kind of the day, because I wasn't confident going down there to this new role. I, listening back to this, would not consider myself, in your words, to have any magic. To not have style or swagger, just a lanky dude in a suit who had basically not looked into a role. I think I'd engineered myself into the role, but I probably felt like at the time that there was a large element of luck that got me there. How does Will Barron of 18, 19 years ago, how does he take what we're saying here now of becoming a market of one or selling like you, and then deliver that in reality to their audience, to their prospects?
I think it's paying attention to your intuition. You'll appreciate this because we both sold in operating rooms in the first portion of our careers. But I remember during the very first total knee replacement that I was assisting on, and not really assisting, I wasn't scrubbed in, but I was in the room because we're real-time tech support. And I'm there. I've got actually 2 managers with me. It's our first case with this doctor. And to bring people up to speed, our job as reps was to make sure that the assistants who were scrubbed in had what they needed and knew what the physician needed before the physician asked for it, right? So we want to make sure that this goes as smoothly as possible. And there was a point in time where the scrub assistant was looking for the mallet. And she's like, "Where is the mallet?" And then I had my little laser pointer and I pointed it out to her and I said, "Just use this one till you find the one you were actually looking for." And she looked at me and my manager looked at me and like just wide eyes. And for like half a second, I'm like, "Oh my gosh, did I screw it up?" And then everybody started laughing because it's just kind of a cheeky kind of thing to say. It kept the mood light. It did things like that. I didn't cross any lines. I showed a little bit of sarcasm. I didn't put anybody down. But all of a sudden, with that team, they started to know who they were working with. And the mood lightened in that room. It went from a tense situation because it was a new system and everything into one where, okay, it's going to be okay. And so I use that as the example because what did that have to do with the surgical technique? What did that have to do with the order of operations? What did that have to do with even the instruments on the back table? It had nothing. But now all of a sudden we were a team working together that could trust each other instead of something very, very procedural. And so, was that the thing that is there sarcasm that runs through my head constantly? Yes. Are there a lot of times where I'm like, "Jeff, do not say that. That is the worst thing you can say." Yes. And most times I'm right. But every once in a while, taking that small risk to maybe make someone laugh, taking that small risk to show a little personality, think about it in your outreach. Are you telling jokes to relate? And not like telling knock-knock jokes or anything, but like when you look at someone's profile and you see that they're into something, can you connect your message or the reason for your outreach to something like that? Can you stand out in a way that I just don't think the bots or anything else will ever be able to capture that nuance? So I say, trust your intuition. If you were talking to somebody, what would that conversation sound like? So many new reps, it's like they don't read their emails before they send them. It's like they don't read or practice their scripts before they say them. I'd say, stop writing email to impress your 10th grade English teacher and start writing email to engage your prospect. Like there's just something about the way that we try to communicate because it's very rigid and we think this is the right way to do. Like drop your shoulders. If you were talking to a friend, what would it sound like? And then maybe dial that back just a little bit because it needs to be a little more formal for someone you don't know. But, how do we practice that sell like you technique? How do we get more comfortable in our own skin? We try stuff that might not work because when it does, it's way better than if you were to use something that's totally boilerplate.
So is this There could be one and the same, but you'll get what I'm saying when I split them up. Is this charisma, or is this something that's formulaic and can be built and practiced?
I think it's both, but I do think that there are some people who naturally have more charisma than others. But I can tell you, because we've all seen these movies, often enough to know that the awkward guy that in the corner over there, with the help of a life coach or a dating coach or whatever, can learn to be a little looser, a little more fluid. I think it's the initial response that people get whenever they try something uncomfortable is, I can't do this. I don't think I can do this. I'm going to screw it up. I'm afraid to screw it up. And when you're afraid to screw it up, when you're playing not to lose, you get stiff. But when you start thinking, you kind of throw caution to the wind a little bit, and you have to start a step at a time. It's not a switch that just flips. When you just become a little bit more comfortable with yourself and say the thing that you think might hit, even though it might miss, that willingness to take small risks like that just goes so far. And then when you realize that more often than not, your intuition doesn't lead you astray, that feeling in your belly, mine's never mine has never led me wrong. That feeling in your belly is the right thing. We are conditioned to talk ourselves out of that. And when we talk ourselves out of that, that's when we become mediocre. And it's something that needs to be developed. I mean, to your point, you have to develop it. And I do believe that some people have a little bit more to start with than others. But so much of that is really just a product of your environment. And so you can develop it over time for sure.
Who or what conditions us out of leaning into our intuition?
Oh, how long do you have? I think it's our parents. I think it's our teachers. I think it's your. I've got friends. I've got relatives. I know people who have kids, and everything. When we're out in public, it's about their kids being quiet and obedient and orderly, and just mind your manners. And stop it. There's a lot of shushing and things like that go on. Meanwhile, I'm thinking, I know what that kid said might have been a little uncouth, but that was one of the funniest things I've heard all day. Yep. And if we squash that out of these kids early, if they learn that intuition, even though they thought it was great, but if they learn that that's inappropriate, it's really hard to open back up to that. Schools. Walk in straight lines, partner up, 2x2 or single file, and sit in straight lines and do your work and show up at a certain time, end at a certain time. I don't believe that we were meant to be put in boxes like that. Now, there's value to that structure, certainly, because the world works in a certain way. But I think, it starts when we're young and goes all the way through adulthood. It's manners. Which fork do I use at the table? Which one's first? And am I supposed to, there's all this order that we're trying to fit into. And while there's value in that, I think it's overdone. And so from an early age, we're taught to deny those intuitions. Really. I mean, and look, I'll say this because I can hear people just, the hand wringing in the back. Look, there are clear things that are inappropriate and you shouldn't do. Again, there's a reason for this structure, but man, if it's funny, can we appreciate the humor even if it came from a 9-year-old? And then teach them maybe there's a place to say that or a place not to say that. But let's not squash the individuality of these people. And I'm fortunate. My kids are hilarious. They're great hangs. And they're so much fun. And especially as they've gotten older now, 15 and 13, I like spending time with them together. I like spending time individually with them because you really get to know them. And I don't want to just pat myself on the back, but my wife and my wife has really encouraged this in me, has been like, no, let them be kids. Like if they say that thing in the worst possible situation, we'll tell them about it. Well, there'll be a consequence, but let's not stifle who they are. And it's shown so far. I've been really happy with it.
I'm sure your kids are lovely. I've got my first baby on the way. So my wife's due in a few months. So you're probably getting at the end of the tale with your children where they are now fun at 15 and you can have a laugh with them. I'm at the other end where you can't have much fun, I imagine, with a screaming baby. There's not much banter with a screaming baby, right?
You might be surprised, but we'll talk about that later.
Sure. Cool. All right, we'll talk about that off air. The one thing that came to mind then was, and I always try to be careful because I am quite a strong personality, and when I'm communicating, I agree with everything you're saying. And when I communicate these things, I always take a step back and go, okay, is this my worldview or is this fact? Mm-hmm. And so how much of this then comes down to personality? So I'm the same. I played in punk bands when I was a kid. I didn't want to sit in class. I didn't have ADHD or anything, but I just wasn't interested. Every parents' meeting at school, it would be, has potential, doesn't make the effort. Is bright, but doesn't apply himself. And that throughout university, even my first sales role, it was always just be more disciplined or just do this or do a little bit more of that. And that's only a skill that I've learned later in life. Even over the past 5 or 6 years, my levels of discipline now are far superior than they ever have been. And that now it serves me well because I've got the screw loose on one end and then the discipline on the other. And the best way I've got to frame that up is that my wife's a doctor and she went to school, top grades, top university, top grades, goes to work, excels, follows all the processes, follows all the steps. And she is wired for that. I would be trying to reinvent things. I'd be trying to be lazy and cut bits of the process out. As a doctor, probably not ideal unless you're on like the cutting edge of some kind of surgery where you need to innovate. Most doctor, engineer, maybe even lawyer, solicitor, there are probably industries and careers that following the rules, being good at following the rules and following procedure, there is value to that. So with that, and I'm sure you're wired the same as me, right? I think we were probably wired similarly. Mm-hmm. So with that said, are people who are wired like us, who have a similar personality type to us, and the audience, as they're listening to this, they'll understand that, do they have a competitive advantage in sales, or are there other personality types and they've just got to lean into other ways of doing sales to get the competitive advantage?
I think the thing that has been very interesting to me recently, about 1.5 years ago, I was diagnosed with ADHD and it started to explain things. Now, I never thought I was ADHD. I wasn't someone who had, I wasn't bouncing off walls or anything like that. Not what you would call hyper. But once, I think there's a couple of things. One, our understanding of what ADHD is and isn't has come a long way. And also, when you look through that lens, and when I ran into some of the things that I had struggled with, things started to piece together and really make sense. But since then, I've thought about this less in terms of, does someone have ADHD or not? Does someone have OCD or not? Does someone have autism or not? Does someone have fill in the blank here? But I think about it on like a spectrum. And a multidimensional spectrum, right? Because all of these things are interrelated. And so if we were to take a 2x2 graph of sorts on paper and just say, and however you want to put your axes, it doesn't matter what the labels are. But I think based on how anyone's brain works in terms of neurodivergence, because what's normal anymore, but in terms of neurodivergence, you are a plot on that graph somewhere. And I think through behavior modification, I think through education, I think through certain disciplines, you can move your point around to be adaptable somewhere on that spectrum that is certainly bigger than a point. Some people may have some divergence that is way out to the end, near the end of one spectrum. That is going to maybe limit them in some ways, but it's going to make them exceptional in other ways. So I say that to say that what we do professionally, what we do personally, has to do with what we try to do and where it relates to that two-dimensional graph where we have, right? There are certain talents that we're given. We're able to modify those talents to a point. But if we try to do something that isn't anywhere near us on that spectrum, we're going to have a really hard, frustrating time. And I just think that while that's always been true, What do you like to do? What are you good at? What can you get paid to do? What's going to make an impact on the world? We think about that Ikigai kind of framework, which makes a lot of sense, but there's more to it than just, what do you want? What makes you passionate? What drives you toward that? We have a certain innate set of skills, and our brains all work in different ways. That's another factor that needs to be layered on there. So that's a complex answer to your question, Will, but I think it all depends on how your brain works, what your body's capable of doing, and what you're asking both of those things to do. And I just think we need to look at that differently. Because I know some people with OCD, and when you think OCD, you think, oh my gosh, hand washing and hand wringing and anxiety through the roof and everything. Yeah, but in a very detail-oriented profession, where you need to make sure you get that right. Think about medical research. Think about, launch codes, in the military. Think about things you absolutely have to have right. Think about the tolerances on those supercars that you like. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, I want someone who maybe where it's really important and it has to be perfect. I want someone who leans that way on the spectrum to be in charge of that stuff. Whereas if I want to show up to a comedy club on a Friday night, I probably want someone at the total opposite end of that spectrum because I need something different from them. So I think what we have to do to more directly answer your question is stop thinking about, would I be good at this or not? Does my brain type, could I be good at selling in this way? I think it's like, well, no, anybody can be good at most anybody can be good at selling. What is the way that you will sell most effectively based on knowing who you are? What can you bring that only you can bring? And, when I talk about the 7 steps to sell like you, I won't go into all of them here, but number 1 is know yourself. You have to know yourself first. And when you know yourself, then you can start to understand how to put yourself in the best position possible.
What do you mean by know yourself? Because that could be potentially, I was going to say misconstrued, but if someone said, know thyself to me, I'd be thinking from a spiritual perspective. Is that what we're talking about? Or is it just know your skills, know your weaknesses, know what you're good at, know what you like, lean into all those things?
That's part of it. And I think all of those things are part of it. But know yourself spiritually. Look, spiritually, if you have some sort of fundamental disagreement with the thing you're selling, you're not going to sell it very well. Doesn't matter how much it pays. Doesn't matter what the work-life balance are, what the benefit package is. There are certain things that you can sell or certain ways that you can sell. I mean, you and I both came up in an outside sales role. We went and knocked on doors. We called on hospitals. We stood in operating rooms. That's far different than pounding the phones all day. Right? And even though it's a similar set of skills, it comes with its own, set of drawbacks. I can make way more calls during the day if I just sit inside. And great. I don't particularly like to do that. Doesn't mean I'm not good at selling, but if I go out into the field, I lose the ability to make that kind of volume. But I'm also someone who's difficult to ignore when I'm standing right in front of you as a receptionist, right? And so what do I know about my character? What do I know about my personality? I like being in front of people. Even though I'm more of an introvert than an extrovert, I like being around people because I appreciate that energy, even though it takes a lot out of me sometimes at the end of the day. Some people in sales may not want that, may not like that. But you put them in front of a dialer and they will connect with people over the phone in a way that maybe I just can't. And so I think it's not also, first and foremost, I mean, this kind of goes without saying, but not all sales jobs are created equally. So to say, oh yeah, you're outgoing, you're really funny, you'd be great in sales. The people who say that don't realize what they're saying very often, right? There's so many ways to be great. And there's so many different kinds of sales jobs out there to be great at. So know what your constraints are. Are you someone who, can't be back to back all day because after a while I get a little twitchy. I need to get up and walk around. I need a half-hour break or a 15-minute break just so I can clear my head and get locked in again. Versus some people who are like, man, will you help me get through these 8 or 9 hours as quickly as possible because I want to get my job done. I want to go do something else. So there's so many different dimensions to this. I feel like I'm almost rambling here, Will, and not even directly answering your question. To sum all that up, I think there are more factors and more scales or spectrums than we realize. And until we start paying attention to them, we're going to have a hard time finding those right fits.
Yep, I think you did a great job covering all the variables there. I think I'll ask your opinion as well, but I think it's probably just as important that you're in the right role selling the right product than it is your actual skill set. I say this all the time. I've said this to a couple of people directly to their faces on our group coaching calls in our training product. Some people are a bit thick, absolutely fine, but they're selling a product that they believe in. So a lot of the nuances of having to fake that you believe in something or to get over the fact that you're essentially bullshitting your prospects, done. Don't have to worry about. Right. And then also, thick is the wrong word. Dim, I don't know. There's a word to describe this.
It might be the right word.
But there's a lad. I joke when I say this to him. He's earning about $700,000 a year, and he's ex-military. He just follows the steps of the process, like clockwork, day in, day out. Never misses a day. Never misses an hour of prospecting in the morning. And that is it. And he outperforms people who, on the bell curve of intel, his name's Tim. He's a great guy. He might even listen to this. Tim, I love you, man. On the bell curve of intelligence, Tim, not me, Tim would probably proclaim he's towards the lower IQ end. He's not low IQ, but he's certainly, he wouldn't say he's particularly bright. But it doesn't matter. He earns and outperforms people who are of far greater intelligence and IQ as much as it can be measured in that kind of one narrow instance by just doing the damn thing. And that's his competitive advantage. And no one can outcompete him because he loves the product, he loves the customers, and he's happy to be sat in an office, he's office-based, just calling, just working on the contracts, just getting things over the line. And I think a lot of people overcomplicate things. I think a lot of people let their egos get into play in all of this. And if they were in a different role, different company, different product, a lot of things would align. And it's not a woo-woo thing. It is literally, as we're describing. I'm more introverted than extroverted myself. Mm-hmm. I would not like, when I do conferences, I've not done conferences in a while, but that was real clear to me. That meeting person after person after person, doing an interview or speaking to potential sponsors or even speaking on stage, I need to have a hotel room at that event so I can just go away for an hour and just recharge and then come back. Some people gain energy from that and can do it over and over and over, and so they thrive in that conference environment more than what I do.
Yeah.
So I think picking and choosing your battles and picking and choosing work, and I think people don't feel like they don't feel like it's an option to them to pick and choose the industry that they work in, when it absolutely is. It's, if you've got any track record in sales, it's not that difficult to break into a new space where you've not worked in before. And I think a lot of people make all this a lot harder for themselves than what they need to. So yeah, did you have any thoughts on that? Do you have any thoughts on the value of the role and the product and the market versus sales skills?
Oh, I do. I mean, because it all ties to belief. And, we talked about intuition earlier. I mean, do you believe in that gut feeling? And I think that those two things are inextricably linked. And so when we shut down that intuition, we're actually shutting down our belief system. And that's where people start to go awry. There's another thing that you mentioned there, and you kind of hinted at it at the beginning of this conversation, where life skills make a bigger impact on your sales success than selling skills do. And what you mentioned about your friend is, look, he never misses a day of prospecting. He's so disciplined, and maybe it was probably at least in large part due to the military background of, this is how we do things. And if you can set yourself up in a position where, okay, no, I believe this is the right thing to do because this is where my belief system aligns with what I've also been taught. The selling part doesn't need to be that complicated. So much of the job is just showing up and doing it. But when I say that top performers have better life skills than average performers, doesn't have anything to do with their selling skills. They're the ones who do the work most often, and they do it thoroughly, and they pay attention to details. And then they also mind their own ability to continue doing that, right? So shutting down and resting is a big part of performance too, because it's all about maintaining that engine. And your friend Tim is, okay, maybe he's not the smartest guy in the room. I mean, if I'm ever the smartest guy in the room, I'm in the wrong room, right? Mm-hmm. But the idea that, hey, you don't have to be off the charts skilled or talented to have off the charts results. What you have to be is in alignment with your purpose. You have to have some integrity. You have to show up and do the work routinely. And those are things that they don't put in very many sales books because those aren't the things that people are looking for. And
it's not very sexy, is it?
No, it's not. But like, I hate to break it to you. And here's the thing and to Tim's self-described IQ, the people who are near the top of the charts there always have this bug in their ear that they can do it better. Because, well, wait, I'm smarter than that. This should be more complicated. No, stop, time out. If you're trying to talk yourself into it being more complicated than it really is, that's probably where you're going wrong. If you just show up every day and do the work and then add your own little personal flourishes here and there, because it makes it more fun and more engaging for you and your prospect, that's when things get fun. But some people are too smart for their own good.
Final question on this, and we'll wrap up. Should selling be fun? You mentioned the word fun there. Should, not all the time, but should a percentage of our time in our sales role be fun?
Yes. If it's not, then why are you doing it? I think there are too many options out there for you to choose one that isn't fun. I'll say that with an asterisk of when you're first getting started, you have to learn all the not fun things, right? Like everything still has a place, has its value. So there are going to be aspects of the job that are not fun. And even when you have your dream sales job, there are going to be aspects of the job that are not fun. But the longer you do it and the better you get at it, the more fun it should be because you've earned the right to make it that way. And there are way too many possibilities out there. So if you're successful and you're slaving away at a job that you just can't stand, please go find another job because it could be so much better.
Yep. I have this saying that, so I'm not religious in any way. I believe that you just die, you're in a hole in the ground, or you get burned into a pile of ash and buried or spread out about, or whatever it is. And so there's a finality there. And so I have this saying that, and I didn't invent this, I'm obviously butchering this for somewhere. You're smart, Jeff. You might know where it's come from. But essentially, what you do each day is how you live your life. So if you're in a job that you don't like, for a long enough period of time, that is just a big chunk of your life that you can't get back. And so, yeah, we all need to make money. And, I would take a 5% drop in happiness, perhaps over a short period of time, to make 300% more cash. So it can be saved, invested, there's obviously a trade-off here, right? Yeah. But I certainly wouldn't be miserable for 20 years to then retire 5 years early. To me, that's kind of dumb. What you do each day is how you live your life. Every time I'm, up or down or whatever it is, or there's something going on, I like to ask myself that question of, can I change what I'm doing, still get same, similar, or even better results? And increase happiness along the way, because you don't want to be miserable long term in your job. It's kind of self-defeating.
Well, I say if you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong. So let's find a way to make it fun. But also, what you talked about too, it's okay, maybe I'd defer some of my happiness now to make more money. Well, you're just deferring your happiness until later. So it's the same amount of happiness. But it's one thing to defer happiness. It's another thing to forego happiness, right? And I think I lean toward the former rather than the latter. I mean, we're here. Regardless of what your spiritual beliefs are, mine are fairly similar to yours. While we're here, why should we squander it? And don't be, don't be a detriment to other people, right? But if you can help other people and you can have a good time doing it, then why wouldn't you? That's what I love about this business. You and I, we solve problems for people, and those problems are so valuable to those people to be solved that they pay us. It's pretty awesome. I get to use my talents, my skills. I get to have fun. I get to do cool stuff along the way. What a way to experience life. So why wouldn't you do it that way?
We have the opportunity to get paid, both in sales, as sales coaches, trainers. We have the opportunity to get paid obscene amounts of cash for talking to people on the phone and tapping on a keyboard.
Yeah.
Of all the roles, of all the things that are going on around the world, we should be, again, not that I'm particularly spiritual, but we should be grateful for that, if nothing else. And we should have big grins on our faces as we go through the day, on the back of kind of really understanding that we're not under any, very few prospects on the back of a cold email driven around to the salesperson's house and beat the shit out of them with a bat, right? You'd have to go pretty deep and dark into the saying what you think rather than kind of using your intuition on some of this to be physically hurt. And so
you'd have to try.
It's an amazing career. You'd have to overtly try. This is not a challenge for the audience.
No,
this is absolutely not a challenge.
But that's the thing. How often have you ever inadvertently hurt someone's feelings and then recognized it as soon as the word came out of your mouth and then walked it back and not been able to walk it back, right? People are so, well, what if I offend somebody? What if I say the wrong thing? It's like, okay, intent. James Muir, who I know you've had on the show, he taught me this. He said, look, intent matters more than technique. And it's not that you can erase the whole thing, right? You still don't want to screw up, but it's not a career-altering decision for you to, I can just imagine people listening to this thinking of the times where it would have been, right? But don't at me. But
your prospects don't care. They don't know you well enough, especially the cold outreach phase, that they will be bothered. The very worst you're going to get is email deleted, phone clink.
Right.
That's
well, it's funny when I train people who sell door to door like I used to. I say, look, you can walk in that front door, trip over the mat, do a somersault, Willy Wonka style, and then just walk back out of the room. If you walk into in that office that next day, they won't remember that you were the person who did that. I mean, you are flying so far below their radar, even when you're in person, that you really shouldn't take yourself so seriously.
Yep. That's a conversation for another time. We can have you back on in the future, Jeff, to talk about ego, perhaps, because we didn't really get into the integrity, belief, performance, sales success cycle, and there's a few other things I wanted to get through. So we'll have you back on in the future to dive into that if you're up for it. But with that, Jeff, tell us more about yourself, where we can find out more about you, and for the audience who want to kind of learn more, what they need to do, what the next steps are. You
can find out more about me in the show notes. My website is jeffbajorek.com. I publish weekly. You can find that at newsletter.jeffbajorek.com, or you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm at Jeff Bajorek. I'm just having so much fun working with and interacting with salespeople, as a coach, as a peer, as a trainer, as a speaker, as an individual contributor. So I welcome the connection. Tell me you found me at this show, and let's talk about what I missed and what you disagreed with.
Nice one. Jeff, I appreciate you as always, mate. And I want to thank you for joining us on the Salesman Podcast.
Always good. Always good. Thanks so much for the invite.